Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something very sad and tragic, and that is the earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria. And this earthquake, at this point in time, well, it occurred around February 6th, and the magnitude was 7.8. But most of all, this has been said to be the disaster of the century. It has taken, to this point that we know of, 25,000 lives. That's how devastating this earthquake is. And I have a soft place in my heart for Turkey. I would go there for many years, and teach there once a year and sometimes twice a year. I had a big following there and many students in Turkey. So I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, and it has some of the most beautiful people in the world. So I wanted to look at the chart of Turkey, the birth chart that I have for Turkey, as well as the birth chart for their president, Erdogan, because what you can see from both charts is that this earthquake was definitely a possibility at the time that it occurred, by looking at the chart for the country as well as the chart for their leader. I always talk about, you can look at the chart of a particular leader to better understand what's going on in a country. So let's put the chart up that I have for Turkey as well as for President Erdogan, and I'll show you what I mean. Now, I have always been big about studying the charts for countries as well as their leaders, because as I told everyone many times, I used to have a website in Japan, and I would write monthly predictions for the country. And I did so for at least 7 years. And it was back in 2011 that I predicted an earthquake would hit in March. And I received many thank yous from the people there that changed specific dates for that month, such as weddings and events. So astrology can be very useful in determining things, but I have to say, I was not watching the chart for Turkey, and I apologize. And there's only so many charts I can look at every month, every year, to keep abreast of what's happening in the world. I've been focusing a lot on the United States and China and places, Ukraine and Russia, because that is where the action has been, or where I feel like the action will be. But going to Turkey, let me just show my point of what I mean about looking at both the charts to see what's happening. Now, I'm a big believer that eclipses are so important when making predictions, because wherever the eclipse are occurring is going to be where Rahu and Ketu are. Rahu meaning the north node of the moon, and Ketu meaning the south node of the moon. And with these two variants, you're going to see where the most change will be happening year after year. So the first thing that I really do look at when I'm looking particularly at a country's chart are, where are the nodes of the moon? Where are the eclipses falling? Where are they happening? Because they create the most change. And looking over here at the Turkish chart, you will see that just knowing on the 7th of February where Rahu and Ketu are so valuable. They were 13 degrees. Ketu was 13 degrees of Libra. And if you put in how many minutes it was at that time, it was less than a degree from the sun in the chart for Turkey, because the sun sits there at 12 degrees 30 minutes. And let me just say, the nodes travel backwards. So K2 was almost exactly at 13 degrees, exactly on the sun, less than a degree, and it's still backing up to be exactly on the sun right now. Now the sun, especially in a chart for a country, represents the heart and soul of that country. The sun sits there at 12 degrees 30 minutes of Libra, and many planets are in Libra. Following that is Saturn and Mercury at 1 degree of Libra. And there is so much going on in the sign of Libra with K2 being there. It's been having eclipses falling over all of those degrees. It still needs to transit over Saturn and Mercury, which will occur probably next November or October because, yes, in November, because the nodes will change signs the last week of November of 2023. And remember, since they travel backwards, it'll go to 1 degree, 0 degrees, then it will change signs the last part of November of 2023, where they will go into the sign of Virgo and Pisces, ending up at 29 Virgo and 29 Pisces when they first enter into the new signs, the end of November. But we still have a ways to go. And I felt like this was hugely dramatic looking at this. Now, also, I wanted to look at President Erdogan's chart because he's got a pretty interesting chart where his moon and Mars sit at 15 degrees of Taurus. I'm sorry, I meant to say Scorpio, because what was in Taurus at the time of this catastrophic event was that transiting Mars on that day was 17 degrees of Taurus. So you see, events occur when planets are within a 3-degree range. That's the most potent for looking at where the transiting planets are. So Mars essentially at 17 degrees of Taurus, pretty much exactly opposed his moon Mars conjunction in Scorpio. And that is a very treacherous part of the zodiac, I must add, because his Mars moon sits exactly on the fixed star Antares, which is considered the star of war. Antares sits at 16 degrees of Scorpio. So the fact that his moon Mars sits on that, sets him up for some pretty heavy things just looking at his birth chart. Anyone that has planets around this degree. But for him, his moon Mars sits in the 12th house, in Scorpio, in the 12th house. The 12th house is the house of losses. And he must be going through a horrendous time with this much pain and loss within his country. This is unbelievable, the feelings, the emotion that he has to be experiencing. And really, everyone in Turkey is experiencing the sadness, the pain, watching the videos of children being pulled from the rubble. It's just heartbreaking. But you can see that there's so much going on in his chart. And another thing I wanted to add about his chart, K2 being at 13 degrees of Libra at the time of the earthquake means that it was exactly aspecting his sun at 13 degrees of Aquarius. You have to understand that Rahu and K2 in my book and from I've experienced, they will cast a trinal aspect. What is a trinal aspect? When it's 5 or 9 placements away. That's the point in the chart that the transiting planet or the natal planet will be aspecting. So in other words, if you will count from 13 degrees of Libra to Aquarius, you will arrive at an exact aspect of a trinal aspect of 5 placements away. So in other words, if that went over your head, don't worry. In other words, what I'm trying to say in this is that Ketu was exactly aspecting his sun. And his sun sits exactly in a trinal aspect to the natal sun for the country. And I always find that leaders will have planets that pretty much exactly aspect the planets for the country that they are meant to rule. It's so fascinating the way this works. You know, I've been talking a lot about the United States chart where the natal moon sits at 7 degrees of Aquarius, where Saturn's going to go soon in March. But President Biden has his Ketu at 7 degrees of Aquarius. If you go back to Donald Trump has his Jupiter exactly conjunct the natal Saturn in the United States chart. So you'll always see these tie-ups with world leaders and their countries' charts. It's the way astrology works. It's all interconnected. But going back to President Erdogan, because his sun sits at 13 degrees and it's exactly aspecting the sun in the chart for Turkey, you know he was meant to lead this country. And as well as when you look back at Turkey's chart right there, you'll notice that their Ketu for the chart for the country sits at 16 degrees of Aquarius, and that is within 3 degrees of Erdogan's sun. So you'll see there's the sun Ketu. This is karmic. They're tied in together, this country. Even Mercury from Erdogan's chart sits at 20 degrees, and his Venus sits at 20 degrees of Aquarius, and Uranus for Turkey sits at 21 degrees. So you see all the drama and trauma and all the stuff that goes on between a world leader and the country that they lead. But one more thing that I wanted to point out that was really interesting is when I went back to the very last time, I'm just going to point this out verbally, but the last time that Turkey had a devastating earthquake was the end of July of 1999. And pulling up those transiting planets, I noticed that Saturn sat in Aries, 22 degrees, aspecting the Venus in the Turkish chart as well as the Sun and all those planets that sat in Libra. So it was when Saturn transited Aries the last time that triggered the chart of Turkey. You will always see these charts being triggered, especially if you're using the right chart for the country. And I have worked with this chart for Turkey for many years. It works beautifully. And one more thing I wanted to mention that is so meaningful about looking at the chart of the country, but particularly President Erdogan, and that is that he was in, or he is in right now. Let's see, he is in the Dasha of Mars moon. It started October 15th of 2022 and continues through May 16th of 2023. So the Dasha sequence that he was in, remember the Dashas are the predictive tool of our life. They will predict when major events happen in our life. And the way that you process these dashas is you look to see how those planets are placed in the chart, and that will give the result of what that individual will experience. So just thinking that he's in Mars moon at the time of this earthquake, that activates his Mars moon exact conjunction in his 12th house with the transit of Mars activating it by opposition. So whenever you're in a Mahadasha, which his Mahadasha is Mars, and the Bhukti, the sub-cycle, being the moon, whenever you're in these cycles of these two planets, of your dashas, when they're triggered by the transiting planets, that's when events happen. And this rings very true of the experience here. And especially the fact that these two planets sit in the 12th house of great loss, while Mars transits in the 6th house of struggles and accidents. It's all here. So I just wanted to look at this, and I definitely, through looking at this, I feel the pain, and I want to express my sadness and sorrow for all of those who are suffering in the beautiful land of Turkey. So let's all send our prayers and peace and healing to this beautiful country that's under such turmoil. So let's pray and send healing love to Turkey. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, if you would like to study with me, or if you would like to get my free newsletter, go to my website, galacticcenter.org, and sign up for my free newsletter. And while you're there, check it out. I have a new magazine, Joni Patry's Astrology Insights. Sign up for that. It's an amazing monthly magazine, 100 pages of spiritual teachings and writings in astrology and metaphysics. And while you're at my website, check out my books, because I just wrote a new book I'm extremely proud of. I think it's leaving my legacy. It's called Astrologer's Secrets, My Best Tools and Techniques. So check all of that out. And if you want to learn Vedic astrology, I have an online self-paced school, all online. So go to that website as well, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.